Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's talk Comixology. Here's a question. By the way, I think that somebody's going to come in like Perch is doing multiple videos on Comixology. Yeah, there probably should be a lot of videos on Comixology because, well, we're going to get into one of the reasons. But this is a very strong indicator on a number of things. It touches on a business model problem. It touches upon the digital transformation of the space. It actually is an amazing case study of how comics are not moving, how there's this inflexible, there's just this entrenched business model and perspective. It's going to be hard to break. And so actually, we should be talking a lot about Comixology. I can almost guarantee you some dumbass, how you call it, is going to write an article about, look at all the chuds talking about Comixology failing, and they're using this as a reason to say that the comic business is falling apart, but it's not. No, by the way, I'll say it. Comixology, what's happened here is more a result of tech company, layoffs. Microsoft lays off 10,000 people. You're seeing this change. We are in a recession. We're in the second stage of the recession, or as a lot of people, economists like to call it, the point of no return. And so you're seeing people who overhired during COVID shedding a lot of those people. This news, Comixology failing, is bad news for the comic industry. It did not fail because the comics are bad. A lot of you may disagree with that concept, but again, baked in, and it's kind of what we're going to go into, baked into the flaws and problems with Comixology, even if the comic business was doing great and the books were all wonderful quality, Comixology still had a major problem, and we'll get into that. So anyway, let me read this mail, which asks a question about it. Hey, Perch. I'm probably the umpteenth person to write you regarding this Comixology news, especially so late in the day of the announcement. Still, I wanted to pose a question to you about it from a hopefully different angle. Without getting into the exact specifics you either don't know or can't disclose due to NDAs, how profitable or unprofitable do you think Comixology was last year? It was unprofitable last year. Unprofitable. Moreover, what percentage of people do you think read comics primarily digitally versus primarily on paper? Most people read on paper. If we're not counting piracy. If you're counting piracy, it's almost all bets are kind of off, and it gets to be a much harder question to answer. But if you're talking, sales, digital sales versus print sales, obviously print sales are much, much higher, and that needle isn't moving. And that thus becomes one of the major problems that Comixology had, which was, there's this expectation that digital would grow and evolve and build over time. And it didn't. It hit about a 10% threshold and stopped. That is a death sign. That's not bad news. That's awful news for technology. With technology and how they're funded and how they build and how they get adopted, there is what a lot of investors like to call a hockey stick that you're going for, where the speed of adoption accelerates over time. When the speed of adoption does not, when it flatlines, that's called, I've done a video on this before, it's called not crossing the chasm. It means you got the early adopters, you got the people who are, into trying new things to come over, but you could never get a mass adoption. And that's exactly what happened with Comixology. Now, why that happened is a good question. As I said in another video, a major reason why it happened is that there was no differentiating factor to digital. Comics cost the same price or nearly the same price. The timing, there was no advantage to being on digital. So how are you supposed to move the mass audience? Your only hope was to get people who are not reading comics to somehow come into Comixology, start reading digitally, and just go from there. That was your only hope, because a traditional reader, you've given them no compelling reason to switch from paper to digital. A couple people will. Like I said, the early adopters came over, but then nobody else did. And they didn't get that. You didn't get that new audience either. And by the way, that is a major canary in the coal mine kind of moment for comic publishers who talk about going for that new audience. You need to, if you're going to attract those people, Comixology was going to be one of the best places that could happen. Hell, when they got bought by Amazon, you had a built-in marketing and advertising arm that in theory should have captured a bunch of people who've never stepped foot in a comic book store before. That did not happen. Why didn't that happen? Well, that's a great question. You can say, well, the content was shitty, but that's not a great answer. It's not a great answer because people never came there in the first place. The challenge that I give you, and I know a lot of people are doing video hot takes on this, but there's no data, there's no evidence that a bunch of people came and tried the comics. You can dig into Amazon's reporting and actually get some information about how well it did. There was never a spike. Nobody saw the content to begin with. It's not like somebody, came into Amazon, downloaded some books, read those books, discovered they were too woke, stopped reading the books. Nobody came in the first place. Is the content also bad? I don't know. That's up to your opinion, but people didn't read the content and were turned off by it. They never showed up in the first place. And for an industry that continuously tells us that they are shooting for a new audience, that new market is going to be how they grow. Yeah, okay, but you got to find them. You got to actually get them, and you're not. It's a pretty major problem. Anyway, back to the mail. It says, I had multiple conversations on that favorite platform of yours and mine, Twitter, about this. My favorite platform. One person said, by the way, I came in, I got a blue check mark based on, whatever it is, verified account. And then I paid for Twitter. I've got screenshots to prove it, by the way, that my account was verified. And then I started paying for Twitter, like $6. I see this meme going out, like people are like making fun of people. Ha, look at this dumbass paid for Twitter. I don't, is that a known? I'll say it this way. I got money, bitch. I paid for it. It allows me to edit posts. I kind of wanted that. I don't feel the $6 or $8, whatever the fuck it is. I don't feel it. So, come at me with the, I'm going to mock this guy for paying for Twitter. I mean, okay, if you say so. I don't know. I do not know who you think you're owning in that scenario, but it's certainly not me. You can laugh all you want, but I guess here, I'll say it. This is gross saying it this way. Yeah, I've got disposable income, and I spent some of it. There you go. So, you got me. All right, anyway. Sorry. One person said, and I'm quoting, "You'd think sales from the bigger companies like Marvel, Image, DC, and Dark Horse alone would be enough to prevent this large a number of layoffs, at least." Well, I don't think that actually, but I also don't know. For all I know, the revenue distribution for Comixology was like that of a niche theater, and actually didn't make nearly enough off individual sales. Or maybe it was like Spotify, with them hoarding the majority of the profits. Either way, it seems plausible that the digital counterpart to an already niche, only marginally profitable industry, print comics, would therefore be niche itself. So what's the story? Should Comixology's financials conceivably be good enough not to lay off more than half their staff? Or does this news just make sense, given what you know and can summarize as an industry expert? Thanks for reading. So, thank you very much for the mail. Again, very basic rule of thumb. Take what you know of comic sales. So if you say, all right, well, this, X-Force is selling, 38,000 to, I think it's around 38 to 40,000 copies a month, X-Force. Okay, 38,000, let's say. Let's even make it easier, 40,000. Digital sales are very roughly, and there are huge exceptions, 10%. So that's 4,000 books were sold off digital, okay? 4,000 books is not a lot of titles. That's how it all, that's where the math's at. But if we want to, do some quick kind of, very basic back of the napkin math, 4,000 comics sold at $4.99. I think it's $3.99, but let's use $4.99. That's a total revenue. That comic is bringing in $19,960. So that Amazon, of course, is not seeing that. They're getting a fraction of that. They're getting what they're like 30% less. I think 30%. I think for rule of thumb, let's say it's 30%. Okay. So in that world, they're making basically. Let's see. I'm just thinking back about 14,000. Is that right? That's not enough money. Now, that's just one comic, but that's being very generous all in. And the other part of it is, for that business, Marvel, DC, Image, etc. business, it's not much cash, and compared to other parts of Amazon's business, why in the world would you be in that business? There's no compelling reason to be in that business, not at that profit margin. And you also have to look at it and say, hey, do we need all these people? Because we could pretty much cut this thing down to a skeleton team, like the tiny, tiny team. We get the same money because this is fundamentally, we're just a distribution channel. Why spend money to make the same money? If you have let's say, for example, if you have a 50-person operation doing Comixology, but all you're doing is taking comics and loading them into the database, and in theory, you probably have an ingestion system. I mean, Amazon is sort of good at that. And in selling them off your storefront, you probably could do the job with 8 people. You don't need all those other people. The only reason you need that bigger staff is if you're producing your own comics. But the comics that Amazon was producing themselves were doing worse than what I just described. So, no, it wasn't profitable. It wasn't moving the needle at all. And there you go. It's not enough money. And it's certainly, if you were a startup and you're able to be cash flow positive with what I just described and everything else, then conceivably you can pay yourself. So you might run a business like that. But Amazon, a multi-billion-dollar business, why would they want to be in it in the first place? Their margins are way too small. The reason why they got into it was because they did want to have the Comixology original track. They did want to own digital distribution of comics. They just discovered it was a niche of a niche. And so it really wasn't that compelling. Amazon looks at it, and I guarantee you the money they make off of their just reselling graphic novels is ridiculously higher. So, why screw around with monthlies? Why screw around with making your own content when the graphic novels and the trades that you sell are making, it's got to be 20 to 30 times the amount of this other business that just becomes a nuisance over time. Particularly, and if you're Amazon, and Amazon does think this way a little bit, if you're looking at it and you're going, and both of the big publishers, the biggest bulk of our revenue, are also pursuing their own digital platforms, why should I enable it? Why should I dump money into something where, Marvel's just going to try and pull them onto their own platform? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So this is, no, it wasn't doing well. And, it is a niche of a niche. And the other part about it is, it was a comment, you'd think the sales from the bigger companies like Marvel, Image, DC, Dark Horse alone would be enough to prevent this large of a layoff. That has nothing to do with any of it. I'm sorry to say, a big corporation, if they can basically make the same money with fewer people, why would they keep those extra people? They would not. They would cut those positions right away. And that's a lot of what's going on. I mean, if you look at Microsoft, you look at Amazon, they're not adjusting their earnings. They're doing all these layoffs, 18,000 in Amazon, 10,000 at Microsoft, plenty of people laying off. You'll notice these big companies are not saying, and we're going to make 5% less. We're going to lay off 5% of the people, and we're going to make 5% less. Nope. In many cases, these companies are projecting growth. So what that basically tells you is they believe that they can get the same job, same money, with fewer people. And so even if Marvel and DC and Image and these others were bringing in tons of cash, chances are this layoff still would have happened at Comixology. They would have just, if they could make more of a profit, they would have just cut the positions and swallowed the extra money and happy days. So anyway, thank you very much for the mail. We need to keep talking about Comixology. There's a lot there. There's a lot of information there. My very, very strong belief and feeling on all this is, look, the direct market is a trap. And that trap has influenced what's going on with digital. And it basically killed it in its crib. And you are, until you solve that problem, this is the result every time. Anyway, thanks for listening.